From Quito, Ecuador, my name is Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South, the evening news brief on Telesur English. We start this new edition right now. We begin in Honduras, where the opposition candidate Salvador Nasralla has unexpectedly announced he is withdrawing from the opposition alliance. Nasralla said that after the U.S. State Department recognized the victory of President Juan Orlando Hernandez in last month's election, the alliance had been weakened and that he had decided to leave the political stage. Earlier this week, Nasralla visited the Organization of American States in Washington to present evidence of fraud in this election. The U.S. State Department released its statement earlier in the day. In spite of widespread international criticism of the elections, the OAS calling for fresh elections. The statement by a spokesperson, Heather Naward, read, "We congratulate President Juan Orlando Hernandez on his victory on the November 26 presidential elections, as declared by the Honduran Supreme Electoral Tribunal. The close election results, irregularities identified by the OAS, and the EU election observation missions and strong reactions from Hondurans across the political spectrum underscored the need for a robust national dialogue." The coordinator of the opposition alliance, former President Manuel Zelaya, has promised to continue the protest against fraud, regardless of Nasralla's decision to quit. More than 30 protesters have been killed since the election, but that didn't stop them from blocking roads across the country this Friday. Our correspondent Hilda Silvestrucci was with them and told us this.
We are on one of the roads out of Tegucigalpa, where demonstrators are on the streets. Earlier, they were removed from one of the main streets. There is a very heavy military presence here, which arrived armed to the teeth with tear gas and other weapons. Protesters have been cleared from some other parts of Tegucigalpa as well, but then they come back again. The new head of the armed forces, appointed by President Juan Orlando Hernandez, has said they will act decisively to clear the streets and roadblocks, both in Tegucigalpa and in the rest of the country. This is a national strike, and the actions will continue, according to Manuel Zelaya, the coordinator of the opposition alliance against dictatorship. This is a program of protest that began on Wednesday with a march to the Army High Command. It continued yesterday with a protest outside the U.S. Embassy, and today people are holding these gatherings to block roads across the whole country.
That was Hilda Silvestrucci from Tegucigalpa. So to Peru now, where shortly before midnight, President Pedro Pablo Kuczynski survived an attempt by Congress to impeach him. After a marathon debate and an anxious wait for the results, the motion to remove him for his links with the Brazilian construction company Odebrecht failed by 8 votes to get the majority it needed. Most of the parties in Congress were divided on the issue, including Fuerza Popular, led by Keiko Fujimori, which had led the impeachment process.
79 votes in favour, 19 against, 21 abstentions. Therefore, the impeachment of the President of the Republic has not been approved.
President Kuczynski went into the streets to celebrate with his supporters after the result was known, even showing off one of his signature dance moves. One member of Congress said he had offered to some of them the release of the jailed former President Alberto Fujimori in exchange for their vote. But members of Kuczynski's party said they had stopped an attack on democracy, while his vice president called for reconciliation.
The only thing I want to do is to thank the lawmakers who voted with their conscience and in the spirit of democracy. I hope that tomorrow we can start a national reconciliation in peace and for the good of the people.
Protesters had also been on the streets in Lima into the night to denounce corruption on all sides. They say they wanted both the president and the right-wing majority in parliament, led by Fujimori, to go. Some of them called for elections and a constituent assembly to set the country on a new path.
All the unions are hitting the streets to tell Peruvians that today the time has come to defend our homeland, and we want all the corrupt members of parliament and the executive to leave. We want new elections and a new constitution. This is what workers in Peru are asking for.
We demand the impeachment of President Kuczynski and at the same time the end of this parliament led by the Fujimorista mafia majority.
Our correspondent Veronica Insausti has more on those claims of a possible deal with the former president Alberto Fujimori to save the president Kuczynski.
One of the congressmen that helped President Pedro Pablo Kuczynski avoid impeachment was Kenji Fujimori. Just hours before the vote in Congress, he tweeted lawmakers should vote against the impeachment process, since this could generate chaos for democracy in Peru. Nevertheless, he was pressured by some of his colleagues in Congress. 8 congressmen and Alberto Fujimori supporters voted against the impeachment and avoided the 87 votes needed to greenlight the process. Meanwhile, Alberto Fujimori did request for his sentence to be pardoned, saying that he has health problems, all backed by a document from the Health Ministry. The declarations of the second Vice President, Mercedes Arauz, that this document does not exist and that the government did not negotiate a pardon in exchange for Alberto Fujimori's supporters voting against the impeachment, are now in doubt. After these events, most possibly Alberto Fujimori will be freed after being pardoned by President Pedro Pablo Kuczynski. Also today, Peru's prosecutors are receiving Marcelo Odebrecht's testimony, and politicians around the country are worried, since it's been said that the Brazilian businessman confessed all about his links to the political leaders. With this, in the next days, we might see Alberto Fujimori out of prison, but his daughter Keiko being jailed.
That was Veronica Insausti from Peru. The Spanish Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy has refused to talk to the ousted Catalan leader Carles Puigdemont, who offered to meet him. After pro-independence parties won a majority in Thursday's regional elections, Puigdemont also said he was open to return to Spain if guarantees were given that he could take his position as head of a possible new Catalan government.
I am willing to meet President Rajoy in Brussels or in any other location in the EU, so long as it is not in the Spanish state, for obvious reasons. I am willing to do this because we need to address a new political phase which is beginning in Catalonia and Spain and Europe, and it must be a phase managed with political solutions.
Mariano Rajoy said he would only talk to the person he called the actual winner of the elections, Inés Arrimadas, of the pro-unionist Ciudadanos party. As our correspondent in Barcelona reports, it seems a new stage in the conflict with Madrid has opened up.
The biggest political crisis in recent years has left visible traces in the streets of Barcelona. Cleaners struggle to remove all these yellow ribbons, a symbol of solidarity with the jailed independence leaders. Thousands of citizens were wearing these ribbons as they went to vote, like Francesc, a professional musician who was also attacked by the police during the October 1st referendum.
This ribbon is simply to show my rejection, my revulsion, for this Spanish state, which is now a totalitarian state.
This 18-year-old girl willingly gave her vote for the sacked president of Catalonia, Carles Puigdemont, who's currently a refugee in Brussels. The General Secretary for Esquerra Republicana called for mobilization in support of the party's leader, Oriol Junqueras, jailed in Madrid.
He was deprived of his democratic right.
A historic election, as the candidate from Ciudadanos said, the party of the right has profited most from the conflict.
I hope we will fill the ballot boxes, that we will fill them with votes.
In the end, the polls were filled with a historic turnout of over 80%, which was key for the victory of Ciudadanos in its number of votes and seats. Nevertheless, from Brussels, the sacked President Carles Puigdemont pointed out that the 3 independence parties are the ones who won an absolute majority. Decree 155, he said, did nothing. Shortly after, this is how the independence supporters celebrated the results in Barcelona.
The independence bloc has won the elections.
After the most turbulent months in recent history of Catalonia, the crisis is back, ready to start all over again.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Two former South American soccer officials have been convicted on corruption charges brought by the United States prosecutors in 2015. The former head of the CONMEBOL, Juan Orlando Hernandez, and Brazil's former chief, José Maria Marin, were found guilty on several counts, including conspiracy, wire fraud, and money laundering. The former president of Peru's Soccer Federation is waiting for his verdict next Thursday. Prosecutors have charged 42 people and entities in this case, known as FIFA-gate. 24 of them have pleaded guilty.
My answer is obviously we're disappointed. You can't.
Cuba's National Assembly of Popular Power has voted to extend its current session by 2 months to April. The Assembly said that the delay will allow more time to deal with the damage done to Cuba's infrastructure by Hurricane Irma. The Economy Minister, Ricardo Cabrizas, told the Assembly that in spite of the hurricane and President Trump's tightening of the U.S. blockade, the Cuban economy has grown by 1.6% in 2017. The decision means that President Raúl Castro will also step down in April.
I want to ratify what I said at the 6th and 7th Congresses of the party about the importance of limiting all senior positions in the country to 2 5-year terms. As a result, when the National Assembly of Popular Power is installed again on the 19th of April next year, my second and final term in office at the head of the state and the government will have to come to an end, and Cuba will have a new president.
Raúl Castro also criticized the United States and other countries for imposing sanctions on Venezuela.
We reject the unilateral, aggressive measures of the United States, Canada, and the European Union, and the foreign interference against the Bolivarian and Chavista process in Venezuela, which threatens the peace and the dialogue between Venezuelans in an attempt to destabilize the country and cause economic hardship for its people.
Rates of homelessness across the world are on the rise, including in the United States, a country which criminalizes it. But in Venezuela, this issue has been given high priority. Our Caracas correspondent, Freddie Gillingham, has more.
It's almost midnight in Caracas. Most streets lie deserted as people turn in for the night. However, for some, work has just begun. Workers from Mission Negra Hipólita are beginning their nightly patrol. They are part of a social mission set up in 2005 to tackle homelessness by getting people off the streets and helping them to overcome addiction. The programme's workers, some of whom are former addicts who were saved by this very initiative, carry out a patrol where they seek out vulnerable people, pick them up and then take them to a nearby rehabilitation centre. There are 32 rehabilitation centres spread across the city. This particular one houses around 300 people and is fully equipped to assist these men on the road to recovery.
On
December 10th of 2012, I felt really bad. A total loneliness on the streets, without anyone, without friends, without finding God. The Negra Hipólita mission came into the streets at midnight. I was sleeping on the street with others and they took us on what they called a rescue operation. They brought us to a shelter where they gave us food, clothes, and explained to us a little about the mission. But when one is so into drugs, he's blind. But I accepted the help, thanks to God, and until now I continue in abstinence and living in the center.
Although some are reluctant to come at first, many end up staying for long periods, as the treatment they receive offers them hope to get back to a normal life and keeps them off the streets.
If my children can watch this message, I will say that I love them, that I am a new person, that I wish, if God let me, to see them again. That is all.
This centre is one example of the many social missions that are still operating in Venezuela, despite the difficult economic situation. For people like Carlos, it's his only hope of getting his life back on track and moving forward. Freddie Gillingham, Telesur, Caracas.
Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza has held talks with his Chinese counterpart at the end of his visit to Beijing. Arreaza said after his meeting with Wang Yi that they had reviewed the existing and planned cooperation projects between the two countries and discussed plans for a visit to China by President Nicolás Maduro. Foreign Minister Wang had rejected all acts of foreign interference in Venezuela. After Argentina's President Mauricio Macri pushed through his pension reform in the face of massive protests, pensioners in Chile have shown solidarity with their fellow pensioners next door. They too fear an attack from their newly elected right-wing president.
A spontaneous gathering of social and union leaders. Passers-by began to support the demonstration when they saw the flags of the No to Private Pensions movement heading towards Argentina's embassy in Santiago.
We are here to show solidarity with the people of Argentina and to tell them that we are proud of them. We encourage their strength. We have to continue to fight the governments of Macri and Piñera that seek economic development at the expense of people's conditions.
Conditions that could get worse for Chile's workers and retirees if elected President Sebastián Piñera doesn't listen to the movement's demands.
We think it's outrageous that around the world we are seeing this kind of repression against those who denounce and demand a little social justice. We are also likely to suffer those same consequences.
The Minister of Finance, Nicolás de Izaguirre, said that the project to reform the pension system would not be ready before the end of the government of Michelle Bachelet.
This project probably will not be ready. We will continue to look for a consensus, but if we can't, it's the next government, which was chosen by a big majority, that will have to decide what to do with this project.
Although a promise of President Michelle Bachelet's, the No to Private Pensions movement was always critical of the government's initiative and wants a referendum on the issue.
We feel like the initiatives that have been presented do not improve but worsen the pension system.
The social leaders are aware that a right-wing government, like Piñera's, could put their demands at risk, but they have hope of the new Congress, which now includes the Broad Front.
Those who took our pension funds are still there. They were there with President Bachelet, and they will still be there with Piñera. We hope that with the new Congress, with new members who say they are committed to our demands, we can make some changes.
But for now, everything is still the same.
More stories coming up. Stay with us. What started off as Friday prayers at the Al-Aqsa Mosque turned into protest as hundreds of Palestinians chanted slogans against the U.S. recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Palestinians continue to protest against this decision by the Trump administration, chanting slogans against the U.S. They also waved Palestinian and Turkish flags and held up pictures of Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan, who spoke out against the U.S. move. Noor Harasin has more from Gaza.
It is a historical day for the Palestinian people and the Palestinian cause. The reactions were amazing from the Palestinian Authority. They prized this move, calling it a historical day. The Palestinian factions like Hamas, Fatah, PLFP, DLFP, they all published statements thanking the countries that voted in favor for the UN decision for Palestine. Palestinian people here on the ground, they are happy and excited, and they hope that this decision is a door to Palestine to get a full membership in the UN. This decision has also energized and pushed Palestinians here in the Gaza Strip and also in the West Bank to organize protests and rallies in support of the decision yesterday, and to head to the borderlines between Gaza and Israel and to clash face to face with the Israeli forces. The hospitals here in the Gaza Strip has decided a status of emergency, as they are expecting casualties to arrive to the hospitals today.
That was Noor Harasim from Gaza. Now let's take a look at our World News Roundup.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has accused the United States of plotting to withdraw from the Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, which bans short and intermediate-range land-based nuclear and conventional missiles.
This way, the United States are in fact leading the destruction of the Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. They are constantly searching for some violations from our side and are consistently doing it themselves, the same way as they had consistently and persistently worked on leaving the anti-ballistic missile treaty, which they at the end have left unilaterally, as we know.
The UN General Assembly adopted a motion on Thursday to reject the U.S. decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital, with a vote of 128 to 9 with 35 abstentions. Ahead of the vote, President Donald Trump had threatened reprisals against countries that backed the measure. After the vote, U.S. State Department spokeswoman Heather Nauert confirmed that Trump was exploring various options.
In addition, I just received a note from our folks over at the White House and the NSC, and they tell me that the president's foreign policy team has been empowered to explore various options going forward with other nations. However, no decisions have been made.
A bomb exploded in the early hours of the morning at one of Greece's main courthouses, officials said. Police cleared the area and said that no one was hurt in the attack. According to local media, calls were made to the police warning of the bomb. There was no immediate claim of responsibility. At least 29 people were killed and 26 others injured in a major blaze at a fitness center building on Thursday night in the South Korean city of Jecheon. The blaze was one of the country's deadliest fire disasters, evoking comparisons with the Grenfell Tower disaster in London. Experts said the structure was a fire trap waiting to happen, with insufficient emergency exits and flammable finishing materials.
Now for a look at one of the big stories that has marked 2017, the plight of the Rohingyas in Myanmar. Decades of ethnic tension had already caused tens of thousands of them to flee the country. But in August this year, fresh violence broke out, forcing a majority of them to flee to Bangladesh. We have this special report on who the Rohingyas are and what's happening to them.
Walking for days in the forest to reach the other side of the river, this endless procession of people are escaping death at the hands of the Myanmar army. Young and old, women and men, they all ran for their lives. But what they saw and faced, they will never forget.
After my husband was killed, I had no option but to run for my children's lives. We spent 2 nights in the hills and sneaked past the border. My children haven't had any food yet, and they've been crying.
Oh, what can I say? The army conducted unimaginable atrocities. They torched all our houses at night. We escaped with our life crawling through the hills.
These desperate people are Rohingyas, largely Muslims who for centuries have lived in the Buddhist majority Myanmar. mainly in the western province of Rakhine. But Myanmar doesn't consider them as their people. Several clashes have taken place between the Buddhists and the Rohingyas in the past. But the most violent attack on Rohingyas happened at the end of August 2017. It started when Rohingya militants attacked Myanmar police posts and an army base in Rakhine state, killing 17 members of the security forces. This led to a brutal security crackdown on Rohingyas. According to Doctors Without Borders, more than 6,700 Rohingyas have been killed in the last 4 months, and 620,000 have been forced to flee Myanmar. The military even brutally killed children and raped women.
They came at 8 a.m. They started burning houses. Everyone was running away. I had my children with me, so I couldn't run away in time. There were 5 men. 3 were just standing there. One of them took my clothes off, and the other one raped me.
The total Rohingya population is 1.1 million, now spread across several Asian countries. Arriving in Bangladesh, they are tired and hungry. Even if they escape death, their struggle hasn't finished.
We fled with my parents. We were unable to eat anything. Today they are distributing food. We didn't eat anything today, so I came here to eat.
Around the world, there was strong condemnation of the situation of the Rohingyas, especially from the humanitarian aid agencies. The United Nations said it's a textbook example of ethnic cleansing and genocide.
Can anyone rule out that elements of genocide may be present? Ultimately, this is a legal determination only a competent court can make, but the concerns are extremely serious and clearly call for access to be immediately granted for further verification. They are denied a name while being targeted for being who they are.
Still, Myanmar's de facto leader and Nobel Peace Laureate Aung San Suu Kyi did not denounce the slaughter of Rohingyas in her country, and in fact avoided even using the word Rohingya in her public addresses.
Over the last few years, the world has focused its attention on the situation in the Rakhine state of our country. As a responsible member of the community of nations, we do not fear international scrutiny. We are committed to a sustainable solution that will lead to peace, stability, and development for all communities within the state.
After a lot of international criticism, in October, Myanmar announced that it will accept Rohingya refugees back in Myanmar, but failed to provide any concrete plans. While one of the poorest countries in the world, Bangladesh, opened their borders and accepted more than 500,000 Rohingya refugees. Their lives are safe, but what is next? What is the future of Rohingyas in these forgotten camps?
And we've come to the end of this evening news brief. This and many other stories, you can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And you can also follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.
Enjoy our programming from Monday to Friday, where you'll find the best information on innovation, conservation, human well-being, and human rights. Keep up to date on the latest innovations in science and technology with At the Moon.